Alrighty, today we are going to just do casting and parsing. And casting and parsing basically just means that, yeah, we have all these data types and yeah, they should be separate, but sometimes we have to let these data types interact. Let's go ahead to our program. And last time we left off from the operators section, we got down to here where we're showing a title, but we weren't showing an average. And the reason why I didn't do it in the last piece is, let's go ahead and put another label in here. As you'll see that we can't directly put that in here. So I created a label here, and we're going to say, we can call this, let's say here, we're going to call this label 1. No, let's call this label, and then output maybe. And in this label output, we're going to just put the piece, your average is, and then maybe colon. Just so it gives it something up here. Label 1, we're going to play with in the next video, so let's just leave that as label 1. I know that looks a little ugly right now. But your average is this, and when we hit the compute button, it'll just fill this part in. Now we could do this as 2 labels, meaning that I could just have a basic label that says your average is, and then put another label in displaying the average. But in this case, no, I don't think so. I think what I'll do is put the answer in terms of this here. So now the first tendency, or sometimes people, what they'll do is they'll try to double click on the your averages in order to operate. But remember, the button is doing all the work. So we want to make sure we're staying inside that button and printing out from that button. So we could say label output. And then remember from last time, we're going to have to put in the word text, meaning we're going to update the text. And if we just put average in and hit semicolon, it doesn't like that. And the reason being is that text is a type of string. It has no problem taking in 2 separate strings and putting them in here. But we can't do that in this piece, meaning that I can't take a number and just flash it up to the screen. So the way we fix this is we have this well, there's a couple of different ones that you can use, and actually this is beautiful. It actually suggested the one I want. We have to do a 2 string, and what this does is it takes the average and changes it into a string for us. And now when I run this, everything should be hunky-dory. Your average is 83.667. Okay, this is looking pretty bad, but we can work with this. What I might want to do here is use another concatenation. So I am going to, where I have your averages, I'm just going to steal this. And I am going to put this right here. But remember, it's a string, so it deserves these double quotes around it. And it's a concatenation, so we need a plus there in order to get it to work. So your average is average to string. And now that should be fine. Now what we have here is actually 2 different types of strings. So the first string is called a string literal. And then I'll just, for lack of better words, I'm just going to call it the string regular. So what we mean by string literal here is that it will put this up exactly as you see it here. Because you're using quotes right in the piece, it forces it to make sure that your average is going to be read out exactly like that when it goes to the text box. So when I hit start again, this will make a little bit more sense. It will show us this piece. Now, that is one type of changing information. But let's go into the more basic types. Let's say we don't want to make the programmer put these test grades in. We want to let the user put these test grades in. What's the best way to do it? Well, we have this wonderful thing called a text box. So let's go ahead and scroll down to it. And if I drag one of these guys up, you can double click, it'll put one on there for you. So I could do double click and then another double click. It'll give me all these wonderful text box. Now with these, you're going to, because we're doing an interactive piece, you can't just let leave these here. We're going to want to put some labels here. But the nice thing about these labels is these labels will not update. So you could technically leave these guys as label 1, label 2, and so forth. Depending on if this is going to be for personal use or how much how important they are. But in this case, we could merely have this. We could say, or if we're going to essentially change it with the program, but I don't think we will. So I'm going to change this one to test 2. And I'm going to change this one to test 1. And I'm going to change this one to test 3. And they probably could use a little bit more formatting. So let's drag these guys down. And you can use that align tool. So I'm going to put test 1, test 2, and test 3 all on the bottom line of my text box. And so now they should know that these are the 3 tests. That seems like it might be a little too distant. So let's go ahead and grab all these and maybe just do that. I want to do that. Again, that might not be so good. Maybe we should move these over and maybe move this because we know that that average is going to come out a little bit different. Okay, we can play around with this later on. Formatting is not essential at this point. We're just trying to get this guy to run. And so now we have a test 1, test 2, and test 3 here. And when we go into the compute button, we don't necessarily need these initializations anymore because hopefully straight from the text box. So we can leave them in there as a piece of safety, but ultimately what we want to do is say test 1 is equal to, well, maybe we should rename these text boxes to, instead of text box 1, we'll call it I'm going to just call it text 1. And then likewise, I'm going to call this text 2 and text 3. And you can see I'm trying to keep them similar in terms of name. Hopefully I'm doing this correctly. And 1, it makes it more clear. 2, it's going to be simple because I can say test 1, and you can see it there, semicolon. If I want to get lazy about this, which I love to do in programming, some people like to type because they can type fast. I just like to make things easy for me. So I'll just change all these to 2s because I know it's happy, or I know if I do it right, everything's going to work out right. But you'll still see those squiggly lines because guess what? Text 1 is actually what? It's a string, whereas test 1 is a number. So now what we have to do is what we refer to as parsing. So what we could say in here then is say, well, what do we want to change it into? Well, we want to change it into what? A double, right? Because that's what test 1 is. So let's go ahead and put in the word double dot parse, and then put this number in there. And then we need one more thing to make it right, is we're bringing in its text, not necessarily, again, not its font size, not its font color, its actual text. And again, we could do the same thing here, and again, I'm going to be lazy. Sure, I probably should have done this earlier on, but I can use the same exact lines, just changing this to 1, 2, 3, and now because we've used kind of a standard, it's a lot easier to see this. It doesn't like this. It says text test 2 doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and check this guy. Maybe I misspelled something. Yes, I did it in reverse. Text, delete test. So another nice thing about the editor, you don't have to get the compiler error right away. And now, should you like it? You should like that, right? Text test 2. Text test 2. Yeah, everybody's happy. This should run. And we should get the same average. And maybe we'll take, let's do this so just to test the proper grading, because it's kind of hard to do this in your mind. But if I did change this into an 85, a 95, the average of 95, 85, and 75 should be 85, because 95 is 10 away from 85 and 75 is 10 away from 85. So they land right on 85. So let's go ahead and hit the start button and let's just test this. Now, I don't know why I just did that initialization, other than to kind of keep it clear. I'm going to type in 95 here, 75 here, and then 85 here. And we're going to compute. We get your average is 85. If you don't like that 85 is so close, we can fix that by just putting a space in the string literal. That's the beauty of string literal. Whatever you do automatically changes it. It's not going to do that. So I can do, in fact, I could do, to keep it even simpler, we know what the average of 375s is, right? It should be 75. So everything is working. Our operators are working, and we're getting the good casting, excuse me, the parsing. But since I said the word casting, let's do that right away. And casting can come from the fact that you're going to mix different types of numbers together. So remember when we said denominator is 3? It would be very easy to just say, since it's a 3, to just leave it as this. The number 3, a whole number without any decimal associated with it. But that is going to screw us up, because if I try this, and, well, actually, let's see what happens. I do 75, 75, 75. But just because it's a whole number, we want it to mix right because of this truncation problem. So in other words, if I say that denominator is equal to this, and we can even put denominator right here. What are we going to do? Well, remember the rules, and I think I said this in one of the earlier videos. The right establishes the left. So just because the denominator is here does not mean that these are the same number. What this is saying is I'm going to do this operation, and I'm going to shove it into the denominator on the left, or the variable name on the left. If that's the case, then this denominator can be 3, but then this denominator will be that average, right? And let's go ahead and pick some more finicky numbers here, just to make sure you can understand. Oops, it says, would you like to continue? No, because it didn't work. And so let's see on here. These warnings we can ignore. We probably shouldn't, but we will. The left-hand assignment must be a variable property of the indexer. So if we put our hand over there, it's the left-hand side must be a variable property or indexer. Well, it is a variable, but what doesn't it like there? This is a constant. So let's pull the constant out first. Now let's hit start. It says no, it doesn't like it again. Okay, so before it didn't like the fact that this was a constant, I shouldn't be changing it. Now it doesn't like this because it says I can't change a double into int. Well, what we can do here is use a cast. And in this case, what we could say then is, let's change this. I put int here and then put the parenthesis here. That gets rid of it. So just by putting the word int here, it's going to change this into an integer. Now you don't really want this because I'm going to say 66, 77, 87, which should give you a value a little bit below 77, but it rounds it down to 76. If I change this to an 84, again, notice it doesn't care what's after the decimal place. But as a person who's hoping to get a B, and has an 89.9, maybe that B turns into an A, right? We know that decimals count sometimes because people will round up. So how do we fix this? Well, first, let's get rid of this. I'm going to call this average. Let's get the average back in here. And instead of doing the int here, we could put the word float. And this forces everything to change from float so that, and let's go ahead and put our constant int just back up there. So it takes everything in here and forces everything to change into a float, and everybody should be happy. So if I did the 66 plus 77 plus 87, we come back and we get a 3. Because we didn't change the denominator down here. So let's go ahead and change the denominator down here. Average. And let's do it one more time. 66, 77, 87, which should give us roughly a 76 point something, close to 877. And there we go. We give it up. Again, that, as you can see, we got a huge number of decimal places. Formatting is down the line. Don't worry about that for now. But we do get the right answer, and everybody's happy. And we've casted, we've parsed, and we've done switched text and ints and doubles and what else, and we all made them work together. All right, so the next step, let's explain where we can define variables. And we'll do that in the next video.